Welcome to Grow Good, a podcast of conversion stories, to share encounters with the living God, to bear good fruit, a place where others can meet or be inspired to meet God. So get cozy, lean in, and listen close. Miracles are at work, and He wants to meet you too. My name is Rachel Smith, and I'm your host. Now let's start growing some good. Hi, friends, and happy Tuesday. I hope you guys have all had a restful, joyful, blessed week. And I'm so excited this week to bring you a story from Christine, who is the Catholic Mama online. She has an incredible story. She actually went from the New Age background and ideologies to atheism, so completely cutting God out of her life entirely, to eventually Christian in the Lutheran faith, and then finally to Catholicism. I just love her story so much. It is so inspiring. I got so much from it. The ways that God works through other people in our lives, how He knows exactly what we need when we need it, how there's no rush. There really is no rush. You're on the path right now, wherever you are. And you understand what you understand. You know what you know. And as long as we're striving to know God and striving to know truth and goodness and beauty and love, that we're going to get there. And her story is just such a testament to that. From an early age, she actually had some encounters with the spiritual realm, dealing with, Ouija boards and things like that. And it's just interesting to see how her journey in some ways comes full circle. She was seeking really that relationship with the spiritual realm, with the divine, but just looking in the wrong places, right? And as we know, when you do that, you're going to encounter something. There is evil out there, and there are evil spirits out there that you can encounter. And so just the importance of finding that of God, the only true and one loving God. And I love how her story is just this roundabout way of coming to know that truth and coming into relationship with God. And so without any other delay, here is the story of Christine. Christine, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so happy to have you here. Can you start us out by just introducing yourself for the audience and telling us a little bit about you and what you do now?
Sure. I am a Catholic wife and mother of 4. I started blogging and podcasting at the Catholic Mama shortly after my conversion experience back in 2018. So I'm a relatively new Catholic coming from mostly a New Age spiritual woo-woo kind of background that turned into atheism in my 20s. And then I converted. I thought it was so interesting. I converted when I was 33, and I thought that was an interesting age when I started digging into just the life of Jesus. And now I was able to quit my full-time office job a couple of years ago so I could be a full-time mom. I homeschool my children. And I am currently working on a manuscript that Catholic Answers Press will be publishing either next year or 2022. Wow. It seems like so space age and far away, but yeah, like in the next year or 2.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to see everything that comes with that, but that's incredible. I love to talk to people that have come from such a different background from myself, because I just find it so crazy how how a lot of people end up in the same spot, but you get there in such different ways. And it blows my mind to hear it. But
yeah. I love to see, I love to see how unique God it can be, working with each of us as he guides us along. As long as we give him a little bit of space, he can really work some wonders.
Seriously. Yes, exactly. And it's like, he knows exactly where we're at. So he'll like give us exactly what we need. And that's so unique for each person. So
Yep.
it's like, yeah, I just love to hear the stories. So thank you for being willing to share it. But yeah, let's go back maybe to the beginning. If you could just give maybe a little bit of background of how you grew up, and what kind of the faith or religion was to you. And then if you can remember, which sounds like in your story, it might have been a journey to that moment, but kind of when you had this first encounter with God at a more personal level where you felt like maybe there was something out there.
Sure. Well, yeah, I grew up in a household of displaced New Yorkers in the South. So I grew up with former Catholics in the Bible Belt, a lot of Bible thumping, rapture believing Protestants. And my family had come from New York, and they used to be Catholic, and now they were just, too sophisticated or educated in comparison to the more naive, faith-filled people that I was surrounded by. So I didn't really have a very positive view of religion. And any time that I was presented with it from most of my childhood, it was from people who seemed like they just wanted to tell me about Jesus so they could tell me that I was going to hell at the end of my life. So it was a lot of hate that I felt. And I felt that I was smarter and better than that. I should point out, though, too, that my parents, even though they had been raised Catholic and got away from the faith by the time that I was born, we actually had a wonderful, very happy family life. And it was a very strong family. And I think that's because of their their own Catholic upbringing. And I don't think they understood that. So they thought that they could pass along, the goodness of the morality of the Catholic Church and the strong family ties and the respect for your family, without actually imparting the Catholic part of that. So, I bring that to mind because I know so many people will say, "Oh, well, I'm a good person. I can teach my children to be good people." And I think that's what my parents probably thought as well. For me, it became very fluid and really very relativistic. My truth, your truth. We hear that a lot today. Mm-hmm. Over time, as much as I eschewed religion, I still had those big questions, where are we from? Where are we going? Why are we here? And I had to go searching for those answers. Which, at the dawn of the internet back in the early or late 1900 or 1990s and early 2000s, took me to a lot of new age websites and yoga stuff. And I wound up finding the answers that I needed there. And at the same time, I also interestingly started having dreams that seemed to come true. And I was playing around with Ouija boards I would learn things from that actually did happen later on, within a month or within a couple of years. So it really gave me this sense that I was privy to some kind of spiritual knowledge about the universe. The veil was being lifted and pulled back for me, which made me feel very high and mighty and very narcissistic. I was told by numerous people over the years that, "Oh, you have a holier than thou attitude." And I'd be, "Oh, of course not." But in my head, I'd be like, "Well, of course I do. I am better. I know things." I was constantly looking for this, esoteric knowledge that showed that I was not just a regular so-and-so or mediocre. I was this very special person, which, now that I'm Catholic, I realize that God has created all of us as unique, beautiful, human beings worthy of dignity. And I was searching for it, but kind of in the wrong pathways as a youth. But over time, bad things happened. 9/11, and my cousin committed suicide, and my brother's best friend died in front of him on his friend's wedding day in a car accident. Mm-hmm. And there was these horrible, and that horrible tsunami, I think, that happened in 2004. So all these bad things started to pile up. And before, I would have thought that, very Star Warsy, that there's this, equal sides of a force. The universe is dualistic. It's split up between good and evil. And so, but it seemed after all these bad things were happening that maybe the bad parts were actually more powerful than the good. And that didn't seem right though. So I started to just get very cynical that maybe I was wrong. Maybe the dreams were just a figment of my imagination. And I was, piecing things together after the fact just to make it all fit for me. And so I wound up going down a very cynical, skeptical route. And around the same time, I met my husband, who was an atheist as well. And I find him to be very intelligent and reasonable. And I figured that he was onto something that I just hadn't gotten to quite yet. And I remember sitting on the edge of our bed after our first child was born and realizing that I didn't believe in God anymore or any kind of universe thing. And my mom would always try to talk to me later on about, spiritual stuff. And I would just kind of push all, yeah, and try to change the subject as quickly as possible. But I just remember sitting on the edge of my bed saying, I don't believe in God. And at first, the first time I said it, the first few times I said it sounds like when you're a kid and you say a curse word for the first time and it's awkward sounding and you feel really bad about saying it. But it grew on me, and it wasn't too long that I replaced the spiritual new age narcissism with just an atheistic narcissism. And I was, I had other atheist friends and would, laugh about our Christian friends who were so naive and the silly Catholics giving up their meat on Fridays in Lent. And on either side of the coin, I thought very well of myself. And when I later on learned about pride being the root of all sins, oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh, that fits me. But yeah, so that's that brings down to it's odd that I wound up becoming Catholic so quickly. Actually, once I got into atheism, and my husband was there with me, and then started going back out because he started piecing his way out and caring more about spirituality. And he was reading a lot of Eastern religions stuff for a while. But then we get a lot of books in the mail from Amazon, and I couldn't help but notice that they were starting to get very philosophical, and then the Aquinas was showing up. And,
I love it.
And then he was starting to go to he owns his own business and would do his computer work sitting at a coffee shop near a Catholic church. And I know that he was walking over to the church to go to mass in the mornings, and I was furious with him. I was so angry because it's not like it mattered. I mean, in atheism, we all poof and go to nothing at the end. So what does it matter if my husband believes in something that I don't? But I felt like he got me down into the muck and mire of atheism, and now he was leaving me. And he was also becoming a better husband and father. So then I felt bad that I wasn't becoming a better wife and mother. And there was just guilt and anger. And I just, he would ask me, so excited. He's like, do you know about Jesus Christ? Do you know who he was? I'm like, are you asking if he's my personal Lord and Savior? And of course I would say it with a bad Southern drawl because that's all I heard when I was growing up. And I was like, yeah, I know enough about him. Thanks, but no thanks. I thought he was just a middleman. Just the whole Bible was written by men who wanted to control things and people and make them scared. And if you really wanted to commune with some kind of universal force, if there was one, you had to do it on your own. And it was your own personal experience, and a church certainly, or organized religion certainly, didn't have any place for people who were advanced spiritually. So even though I didn't believe in any of that stuff, I still, once again, was pretty arrogant.
Yeah. I love how it's sometimes we're our own worst enemy, we just we get in the way of our own self, by putting all these walls up, but really they're keeping us from truth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then it's funny, as he was starting to, he kept asking me to go to church with him. We at this point, we were young parents. We had our first son who just turned 7 this past week. We had him out of wedlock, and we finally got married when he was about a year old in a fun little wedding ceremony in California. We got married in the Philadelphia airport, I should say first, technically. Had a ceremony and some good wine in wine country in California that week after we got out of the airport. But I get to I'll get to, I guess, later, but the most meaningful one certainly was when we got our marriage blessed in the church right after I got baptized, a couple days after I got baptized. But so, our marriage, we did things out of order, in the traditional sense. Of course, more and more people are doing it the way we did, and we didn't think anything of it. But we were struggling in a lot of ways. We didn't have, marriage was just between two people who enjoyed each other and had fun and probably had similar values in a lot of things. But we had no idea that it was a sacrament and what that would mean. And so we fought a lot. We love each other very much, but we fought a lot. And I noticed that before he started converting, he's quick to forgive, and I'm not. So, he would, for a long time, he would help cool me down very quickly. But then the space between our fights got less and less. We'd be bickering every day, and there'd be a blowout fight every couple weeks. And then he was slower to forgive me. I was slower to cool down. Everything was too much. We were trying to numb things, I think, and just behaving very poorly. And, but he started changing and becoming a better husband and father. He was more joyful, and I was still stuck in where I was. But I really had this problem that I didn't believe in God, but I really loved my child. And, I was horrified at the thought that we would just, be dust, in 100 years. And all the time that I spent loving my son and caring for him and teaching him things and reading to him and bathing him, all of that would be meaningless because he would just grow up and get old and die. And so would I, and we'd never see each other again. And I was horrified at that idea. And so for the first time in a very, very long time, it was very, very cynical. I mean, I didn't even like celebrating any kind of holiday. Even, I did anyway, but I was always just just a big Scrooge about everything. But I was getting tired of my cynicism, and I really was hoping that there was something out there that would mean that I wouldn't, my son and I would not be parted for eternity at the end of all of this. And so, as my husband was converting, I don't know why it showed up on my Facebook feed, but I kept seeing this advertisement, and I don't even know what it's for now. I tried to go back and find it, and if I did, I don't think it was I don't think it was religion, which I thought it was. That's what I construed it as. But I saw this advertisement that said, "What if for 30 days you just believed?" And I saw that, and I was like, "Huh." Yeah. Like, what does that mean? My husband's starting to become a Christian. He keeps asking me to go to church with him. And because we didn't have a lot of friends at this point who were in a similar life stage as us, because, we were still hanging out with a lot of his college friends, and he's on the younger, so I'm a little bit older than him. He's on the younger side and the first one to have a kid. He's like, well, what if we went to church and, made friends that way? I was like, you can't just go to church and make friends. You got to believe in this stuff. You can talk about he remembers the pancake breakfasts at church when he was a kid and how great they were. I was like, I can't go and eat breakfast at a church without believing in Christ. But he kept pressuring and pressuring. And then, not in a bad way. He just kept bringing it up. He's very persuasive. Yeah. And I was like, fine, I will go to a church with you, but there's no way in hell it's going to be a Catholic church. And there's no way in hell I'm going to become a Catholic. And he's like, okay. Well, you pick, but I don't want you to, I would like to go visit a Catholic church with you but you pick first. We'll go to wherever you want. And still that idea of, what if for 30 days you just believed kept playing in my mind over and over again until one day, I think it was in November of 2017, I was like, okay, how about this? I'll do this. I'm going to make up a faith challenge for myself. What if for 30 days I just believed? All right, sure. My husband's really into all this Christian stuff all of a sudden. I'll try a month. If, I'll do whatever Christians do. I guess I'll pray. I didn't really know what Christians did. It's like, I guess you go to church and I guess you pray and you read the Bible. And I even bought a little cross necklace. I was like, that seems like something they do. And if anybody asks me if I'm a Christian for the month, I'll tell them yes. Not that I'm faking it really, but I'll really try it on. I'll really try my best at it and be very sincere in my trying. And after the 30 days, worst case scenario is I'll have to eat a little crow, find out that I was wrong, that Christianity is all bunk. But on the flip side, if it is wrong, then I'll have more evidence for my atheism and I can go right back to being cynical and unhappy, which sounded awful to me. I really didn't want that. But it also terrified me that Christianity might be true and I might believe it. I just figured that was something future Christine would have to worry about. So knowing my hangups about God, thinking that he wasn't really historical, probably if he was just a guru, just a good religious teacher, interesting fellow, and that I had a problem with the hierarchy and the patriarchy of the church. My husband gave me this book that really helped me to see the main hang up I had was growing up, I would always hear, have you, oh, Jesus died for your sins. And I hated the word sin. I didn't understand it because I didn't even believe in it. I didn't believe in mistake. What did I used to say? Mistakes aren't real unless you don't learn something from them. So I could do anything. I was able to justify any behavior so long as I learned a lesson. It didn't matter what kind of damage I did to myself or others. So I hated the word sin. I didn't believe in mistakes, at least on my part. Other people would make mistakes, not me. But the idea of, and then dying for me, I didn't ask him to die for me. I don't want any of this. It sounds like a burden. So I really had that was like my biggest hang up about anything with Christianity. And so Pat handed me this book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And my whole family comes from a journalism background. And this book follows Lee Strobel. It's a true story. He was an investigative journalist for some newspaper in Chicago, maybe Chicago Tribune, which immediately piqued my interest. And he was an atheist whose wife had also been an atheist and then converted to Christianity. And he went on this investigative journalism journey to try to deconvert her back to atheism. And I was like, well, you got me. An atheist.
Yeah, you're like, this sounds
journalist.
great.
Yeah, I was like, this is it. I get this. Okay. And what I really appreciated is that he interviewed a lot of experts, many of whom I've gone on to read other of their works. They're the best in their fields. And he interviewed historians and anthropologists and psychologists and psychiatrists, and debunked the mass hallucination theory, and that he was just a good guy, or maybe he wasn't even historical. And then they got to the part explaining, whatever chapter it was, explaining that Jesus, how he died for our sins, that we do have as humanity read in our collective ledger, and we needed this spotless victim in order to wipe it all out. And however Lee explained it, I was sitting nursing my second child at that point, and it was dark in the room. I was just reading on my Kindle, so the light was shining on my face, and I remember just being blown away. And I turned off the fire. I wish I could say like I closed the book and it was very dramatic, but I just turned off my phone. I just sat there in the dark, and just I thought, oh wow, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. Like I'm a Christian. I believe in this, and I was floored. I had no idea what to do, because the next sentence I was like, oh, okay, now what? I was like, oh, I guess I have to find out what Christians do. I've got to join a church and all this. And so I finally agreed to go to church with my husband, and he let me pick. And I had been friends with a couple of Lutherans growing up, and I thought that sounded nice. I figured if you did believe in this God stuff, that you should pick a church that at least was respectful. And because I've gone to a couple of non-denominational services that seemed a little too wild for me, like with mood lighting, and one church had a t-shirt cannon, and they were shooting shirts into the crowd.
Oh gosh.
I was like, it can't be that. I mean, if you're really gonna believe in Jesus and all this, I think it probably should be respectful. So Lutheran was as much as I would concede, and at the same time we would go once a week, and I remember being annoyed by it, that it was too hard. At this point I've got 3 children. I guess I was nursing my third baby now, and now I'm realizing the years blur with all these children. But I had all these kids to pack up. It was November, December. It was cold. It was snowy. I didn't want any of this. But I did promise, and I was a Christian now, so I had to do something. And my husband was still going to Mass as well and asking me to go, but I wasn't going to go on a Sunday because we were going to the other church, and I couldn't go to the daily Mass because I just made a bunch of excuses. Well, I legitimately had to be at the office job that I was working, and I couldn't. I would have been like 45 minutes late had I gone to daily Mass. But I finally, even Pat, he has terrible eyesight and hates driving at night in bad weather. And it was on Christmas Eve, and it was sleeting. And we had planned to go to the Lutheran church the following day for Christmas. And he's like, and I'm sitting there making like this huge, elaborate Christmas Eve dinner. He's like, I got to go to Mass. I was like, what are you talking? It's sleeting out. You can't drive. You can't see. And I'm making dinner. It's like our Christmas dinner. It's almost done. And he's like, no, I'm sorry. I got to go. I was furious. Another thing about being furious. And he said, that's a miracle. We agreed that's a miracle in itself that he drove in bad weather at nighttime when he can't see and got there and back alive.
Wow.
But he had this intense urge to go to mass that night. And he went to probably one of the most beautiful Catholic churches in our area at the time that was built in the 1700s and is really, really quite beautiful. And he had a big experience there, but I still was, at this point, I was like, I got to Christianity. Isn't that good enough? Do I have to keep looking? I'm stubborn and I'm tired, and we have this.
Want to be done? Yeah,
I'm done. You got me here. Isn't that good enough? But apparently, God still wanted me to go a little bit deeper and wind up in His church. So that took a little bit more time. The biggest thing that helped me to get to Catholicism would have been Pat had turned on the Catholicism series that Bishop Robert Barron had done, The Word on Fire, and the cinematography is so beautiful and the soundtrack is so great. And he just had it on when I was walking through the living room one evening. And so I was intrigued by it and sat down, and it happened to be the episode explaining the transubstantiation of the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. And I didn't know about that before. My best friend growing up was Catholic, and I'd gone to quite a few Catholic masses if I had spent the night at her house on Saturdays, and I would have just proceeded to get in trouble with her mom because I would have been talking the whole time and trying to distract her. And I always remember making some kind of chortle or remark whenever the bells would ring because I didn't know what was going on, and I thought it was really dumb. And then, but lo and behold, I find out what the bells are signifying, and that this is a real modern day miracle that happens every day in the church, in every Catholic church in the world, that our Lord is physically present with us in Mass, and you can be part of this miracle every single day if you want. And it had never been explained to me before, and certainly not like that. And it just so happened that I finally agreed to go to daily Mass and be late to work, I think the following day.
Wow.
And when the priest, who was a very, very holy priest and one of my favorite priests that I've met in the past couple of years, was celebrating the Mass, he was so reverent, and he took so much time with the consecration that I've said it in numerous places, but if I hadn't already been on my knees at that point, I would have fallen to them, because now I understood just the magnitude of the Catholic faith, and how it's not just, the smells and bells for no reason. It's not just, having the incense and the pretty pictures and the funny outfits and the music and everything to act as some kind of self-important middleman to you and God. It's that we are calling to mind heaven here on earth and orienting ourselves to stop paying attention to the mundane and the outside stuff and the everyday, and having us, it's focusing us on this miracle that's happening. And so to find out that you can't get that in any other church in the whole world, and that it blew me away. And at that point I knew that I had to become Catholic.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I kind of love that you just said your entire story like uninterrupted.
Sorry.
No, I love it because it's like literally my mind is like blown right now, because you literally went from you just literally went all around. Like you went from New Age to atheist to Lutheran to Catholicism. You really have gone through the whole span of it. And I just love how now it makes you appreciate it so much deeper. I feel like you get it in such a deep way that other people that have grown up around it and have just had that all the time, I think it's easy to lose that. But from being away and looking at all of these different things, I feel like it almost makes you even more appreciative of what it is that we have in this miracle every day, if you want. And
Yeah.
it's just, I love how you explain that. So it was so beautiful. And I just love too how he used so clearly Pat, your husband, just so clearly in your own story, and how I just love to hear that, because I just feel like Pat was just doing what he felt was right in his heart and in his journey. But by doing that, he was impacting you and your journey, which is
very
just,
much.
it's just so crazy to think about how he uses us just by our own living out our own, call, or what we feel like we're called to do. And it's making such an impact on you. And he probably wasn't even trying a lot of the times that you mentioned to even get your attention. He was just kind of doing his thing. And all the while you were noticing these things in him that were kind of changing. And I love how you explain that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's good at selling too. So he knew when to back off, and he knew he couldn't push too hard. He's very good. He's actually gotten a few of our friends to convert to Catholicism as well, because he's just very articulate, and he's a very good Catholic apologist. But yeah, he every once in a while he'll just kind of nudge me playfully and remind me that I wouldn't be Catholic if it wasn't for him, which is true. I would have been too lazy, and he helped tremendously. But yeah, it's funny because somebody recently told me, without knowing my story, but knew that I was a convert, said, "Oh, hang in there. In a couple of years, you might feel some spiritual dryness, and hang on." And I said, "Thank you. I will keep that in mind." But to be honest, I just can't imagine. I have already experienced, it's been a couple of years, and there's certainly times where I don't feel like doing any of this stuff. It's, it was cold, and we get up and take our children to mass we go every single day. And it was very cold, oddly cold in Wisconsin the other day, and it was dark for a 6:30 a.m. mass, and I really didn't want to go. And I was trying to rationalize it for a few minutes. I was like, "Oh, please, no way!" And we got up and went. And just to be honest, I know what life is like without God, and there's no way. I don't want to say that God can't throw so much suffering at me that I'll begin to question any of this, but I can't imagine. I suffered so much without God. I can't imagine going back to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw this wonderful quote. It said, "You're going to suffer in life with or without Jesus, and rather suffer with him."
Yeah.
So I can't imagine leaving any of this for any kind of dryness or some dark night. Oh, I'm sticking around.
Yeah, totally. And I totally agree. It's kind of like, because I feel the same way. Like, even being raised Catholic, none of it really connected. It was kind of like what you were saying, with kind of feeling separate from it the whole time. It was kind of abstract for me, at least. And I'd have moments, but eventually when I went off to college, I just fell away naturally, because it had never, a lot of things, which now I look back totally were taking root. But at the time, I just I was just doing my thing in college, just kind of didn't think to go to mass. And then you experience it, and you experience God, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I could ever go back. You can't. I don't think you can, because you're just changed. You just know that it's true, and he's there. I don't know. It's just, it's very weird. It's very weird experience, because then to go back into the world of where there's a lot of non-believers, it's just a very weird thing. It's very surreal.
It is. I constantly have to remind myself that people are not on the same page as I am. And it took me 33 years to believe in Jesus. I can't expect anybody else. Just because I believe suddenly does not mean that everybody that I'm around is, usually is going to feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you wish you could just pick up all your knowledge or all your experience and just give it to them, to be like, you need to understand, but what I understand, but that's, yeah. That's why I love these stories, though, that to hear how he was working through other people in your life without them even really fully knowing all the time. It's just a cool thing. So.
Yeah. Pat, I know Pat was helping me, and a friend of ours who's a non-denominational Christian, I think it's very humorous, because she kept praying that Pat and I would find the truth and find Jesus. And we found Catholicism. I was like, don't you think you should know that? But no, not yet. But those are the people I know who are praying for me. I am so excited to one day, God willing, be in heaven and get to meet people that I didn't really know who prayed for me and got me there. Because I think that'll be pretty cool. And even now, people will reach out every once in a while and say, just so you know, you're like the top 3 people who got me back to the church, or, I went to confession and back to confession because of you, or whatever. But like, oh, I got that. The first time I got that, it was a couple months into doing podcasting. I was like, that makes it all worthwhile. Yeah. Any of even the past insanity of my life and the bad things that I did and the bad things I said about God and all that is all worth it, that I possibly helped save one soul, which is crazy to think. So I know there are people who did that for me. I'm excited to meet them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Oh, it's so good. But so I guess, how has it been since? You kind of touched on it, but what have been some of your greatest challenges and what have been some of your greatest joys in knowing him and coming to know him?
Yeah, I mean, everything has changed, and it's infinitely harder in a lot of ways, because I am called to not just do the lazy thing or the self-indulgent thing, and do what Christ would like me to do. Which, it's interesting. Right after my husband and I converted, a close family member of ours had and we had to stay in intervention, and it was very, very trying and tiring. And had it been before the conversion, I would have just been like, well, that's their problem. Let them deal with it. They got themselves into this mess. And I would have been very hard and cold and unfeeling towards them. But since we converted, I mean, that is like such the biggest visible difference right after we did convert, because I knew as much as I wanted to just say those things, and at one end, I actually wanted them to get better, and I wanted them to feel the love of God and all these like wonderful things and get help and get well. So even on, from the very beginning, it changed big things like that, but it changed absolutely every aspect of my life and day. I mean, just the way that I'm not slow to anger, but I'm slow to forgive. And that has had to change tremendously. Thankfully, through frequent confession has helped that with my venial sins. Being more patient with my children, realizing that they are my brothers and sisters in Christ, which I think is a very cool thing, that children are that as well, along with being my children. Just being more feeling, because again, I was a very hard, kind of icy person, which of course I would be, because I was an atheist. I didn't believe in any of that stuff. That's, each life, each person is an island, and do the best you can. All right, good luck, bye. So that changed a lot. The hardest, so it's kind of been that's also been kind of the easiest thing, because it's been very freeing. Yeah. I was getting very tired of being cynical and always saying no to everything or to people. So to finally have this ability, because my own ego wouldn't let me do that on my own. I couldn't stop being skeptical or icy or caring, or start to be caring on my own, because my ego just couldn't do that. But I could take on Christ, and he could do those things for me. So it stopped me from being that no person all the time, or that icy, unfeeling person. And it freed me to be compassionate and caring, which I remember being as a child, but the older I got, and the more like moral relativistic I got, and then atheist, the meaner and icier I became. So it felt like I was going back to a part of my childhood that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, I love that. And it says like to be like a little child in scripture and stuff. And it's so true. It is kind of like finding your little kid again in your heart. Yeah, in a lot of ways, which I love how you described that. But you kind of touched on like your intellectual journey and your heart journey. But did you go to RCIA at that point? Yeah. And then what was your first experience, I guess, of like praying, or did you have an encounter with God where you kind of felt his love for the first time?
I did RCIA, but by the time that we had left the Lutheran church and started, sent an email to the Catholic parish that my husband had been sneaking off to during his morning work time. It was already February, so it was in the middle of Lent, and but because we had done so much searching and research, the religious sister was comfortable in letting me get baptized at Easter Vigil, which I think was very early April or late March. So I was only in RCIA for about a month and a half or 2 months. I wound up doing it again the following year before I got confirmed. We got everything mushed up and out of order. I could get baptized, but we were married and our marriage wasn't blessed, so it had to get blessed after it got baptized and whatever. So it all expanded in the time. But I loved the RCIA process. That same holy priest that helped me so much to understand the transubstantiation helped me to see God on a personal level 2 other times. One was in the evening session of RCIA, and we would go through the gospel reading for the coming Sunday and reflect on it. And he was very contemplative and liked to take time and have silence. And it was this wonderful father of rule he was a very fast talker and had a very thick Indian accent. But if you could get in, like hone in on his frequency that he was talking on, you could understand everything he was saying. But it was a gospel reading about, when 2 or 3 of you are gathered in my name, I am with you. And I remember being floored by that, because here we were, about 10 people around a table praying to God in Jesus's name. And I suddenly felt that, everything that I was trying to do when I was New Age and spiritual was to find this personal connection with the spirit force of the universe and all that. And it was always just out of reach. But here it was in very plain language that this is what you do. You get together and you pray, and Jesus is with us. So I remember that just dawned on me one day in there, and I got all goose pimply, and I was very sad when our meditative time was over, because it was just I was floored, even realizing that Jesus had been right there with us. But then another time after I was baptized, my husband says it's cheating because he was baptized Catholic. And so when he came back to the church, he had to do a very long confession. Well, the same priest told him that he cut him short when Pat started listing off all of his sins for like 30 years. But when I was baptized, all my sins were forgiven. So I had 33 years of sinning that got washed away. And my husband was joking, saying that wasn't fair. But when I was 17 years old, I had been faced with a difficult decision, unfortunately, and had chosen to have an abortion. Mm-hmm. And I felt such shame and guilt and sadness over that I knew that God had forgiven me for that in baptism. But it still lingered, and I felt awful. And I didn't trust that. I just needed to confess it. I needed to say it out loud, because I hadn't said it out loud to God. Even when I was trying to explain it away and justify it in my mind when I was 17, I didn't believe in God at that point, really. So there wasn't anybody to say I was sorry to or ask forgiveness or anything.
Yeah.
So I waited until I was very nervous. I was sweating. I had butterflies in my stomach, and I waited until I knew that Pat had gone in first and come out and said, "Oh, it's Father of Rule." And I was like, okay, I feel he's the one I want to confess this to. And I was surprised, because I started crying immediately, which I thought I had dealt with a lot of the tears part, because it was such an thing from 20 years ago almost. And he reacted and approached me with such love, and I knew that love came from God. I mean, it was otherworldly. It was supernatural. I mean, just the feeling finally that I had been forgiven for what I had done, and that God loved me even for the worst that I had done. And it was incredible. And I've been a huge supporter and proponent of the sacrament of confession ever since. Yeah. Go to confession.
Yeah. And there's so much grace there. And it's, like you're saying, it's supernatural. I mean, it makes sense to me that the world would trample all over confession, because it's literally one of our greatest gifts. There's such power there. So it makes sense that I think the devil tries all he can to keep us away from it. But I completely agree. It's life-changing when you start to go. And it's crazy. It actually does battle sin away from your life, and it works. And it does. It really does.
There's been times where I've stopped myself from, at this point, it's just venial sins that I am committing each week. But there's been times where I have held my tongue from saying something quite unpleasant, just knowing I didn't want to confess it later. But it's the grace. It keeps you from, it just reorients you back towards God.
Yeah. And like you're more aware of how you act after. It's crazy. I don't know. It's real.
It does. It brings more awareness.
Yeah.
And there's no way, I have to drag my impatience and my anger into the confessional every time. But there'd been all those years ago, I'd be like, why can't I make any progress? Because I'd be really impatient and snip at somebody, or I'd get angry really quickly. And I would try to blame the other person, that it was their fault that I got angry. And then I would feel really guilty about it and be like, okay, next time I'll do better. But I could never get better because I can't do it on my own.
Right.
You can't do that. You can't make this progress on your own. So I used to get so frustrated, and I kept seeing, no matter how aware I was that I needed to get better at it, I was getting worse. And then suddenly going to confession, a couple times a month, I finally making progress.
Yeah, because you just like surrender it.
So long. Yeah.
Right. And there is something so free in just like surrendering it, giving it to God and being like, I can't do this on my own. And then it is so true. It's like, once you do that, you feel lighter because like he says, he wants to carry it with us and be in this together. And so, I love
we could skip right out of there. I know people get upset or they're nervous about confession and what will the priest think. I got to tell, I know there are priests sometimes who are harsher, but even if you had a bad experience once, if I find somebody else, or if it's been a long time, just go. I think Mother Angelica encouraged somebody, if it's been a long time since you've made a confession, go get an ice cream afterwards to celebrate.
Love that. I love that. All right. So Christine, what have been some of your standout influences along your journey? Are there any maybe books or speakers or any experience you want to maybe call out for others that maybe are on the journey as well?
Definitely the Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, because that explained historically who Jesus was and debunked a lot of the myths that I thought about. Of course, that's a broad Christian look at Christ, not a Catholic one. And then the Bishop Barron Catholicism series was instrumental to my growth in the Catholic faith. So those are the two main ones. I am very lucky that I have a husband who is very philosophically minded. So now he may have gotten me to Catholicism. I help him along with like the prayers and the day-to-day stuff and getting everybody to mass every morning. But I am very blessed that I have somebody where I come up with some random question. There's a good chance that he knows the answer to it because he's a prolific reader and researcher. So he has a podcast actually called The Pat Flynn Show and does a Sunday school episode every week where he talks to philosophers and theologians. And so I've learned a lot through him. Actually, he is now like ongoing is the biggest influence on me.
That's amazing. That is awesome.
I'm very blessed that I have somebody in the house where I'm like, hey, how, and then we talk about purgatory or suffering or anything.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you can just ask instead of doing your own digging.
Yeah. And I should say, anytime that he doesn't know or I can't get in touch with him or whatever he's working, Catholic Answers is always good for a good, they're publishing my book too, but they're very good.
Yeah, they are amazing. Yeah.
Anytime I have a question like, indulgences or whatever, they have the answers to everything. So they've been a huge resource ongoing.
Cool. Great. All right. So the last question I hope to ask everyone who comes on is, can you share with us one scripture verse that is either speaking to you recently or that played a foundational role in your journey and why?
What comes to mind is it's like 5 lines, so I'm not going to know all of them, but it's Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 to 20. And it's basically saying, by their fruits you will know them. At first he talks about the wolves in sheep's clothing, but by their fruits you will know them. And that speaks to me a lot, coming from my background of New Age and all the spiritual reading I used to do and the dream interpretation. Well, a lot of the gurus and people I used to follow, their lives were in shambles. They were getting divorces. They were abusing drugs. They were promiscuous. They had all these horrible things that were going on, and they were leading people astray. And it was getting more miserable by following them. And and I don't know, just knowing, looking like by their fruits, you'll know them. Well, I look at the Catholic Church and I see that it is the largest charity in the world. And I know personally the fruits of our home and my life, it's so much better than it ever was with any other discipline that I followed or believed in. And so it's just a good reminder to me that never to go back to where I used to be. That I can see the fruits of all the other things that I used to ascribe to, and they're just awful. They're bad. And everything that church and Catholicism has done for me has borne just wonderful fruit.
I love that. And it's such a good way to test anything in your life, like how it makes you feel after, like, are you stressed and bothered after you're doing this activity? Or do you feel peace? And do you feel like it's bringing good fruit about in your life? And so I love that.
Yeah, it's a good barometer for sure.
Yeah, it's so good. All right. Thank you so much, Christine. This has been amazing. Your story is incredible. You really have run the gamut, like all over the place, but it has made you, I think, so much stronger in the faith, and so much, you get to appreciate the faith at such a deeper level. And now you get to help others who are in similar boats that where you've been, which is such a gift. Willing. Yeah. So thank you so much again.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye. Thank you so much for growing some good with us today. Visit us at togrowgood.com/podcast to find links to everything we mentioned in today's conversation. If you enjoyed today's conversation, would you please consider leaving us a review on iTunes or on whatever app you're listening from? Reviews help podcasts to show up higher in search results so that more people can find these incredible stories of the Lord at work. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider sharing it with a friend, a family member, or a coworker who might enjoy the conversation as well. Find us on Instagram at @togrowgood. See you next week.